Good morning, good day, good evening. Welcome to Pivoting to Web3 podcast. And today's guest is Robert Indries. And Robert has a phenomenal background, way over the top of what I have ever accomplished. So I'm so glad he's here. And I'm going to let Robert introduce himself and share. And this gives us a global perspective of what's really happening in the Web3 space. So, Robert, introduce yourself and share whatever you'd like.
Thank you so much, Donna. I'm very pleased to be here. Thank you so much for having me. Well, almost no one listening to this podcast probably was born with Web3, right? Some of us
Exactly.
even remember Web 1, where there barely were any websites. It's just nothing was on the internet, right? So everything was static.
That's true. So, how did you get into this space? What's your background? How did you end up here?
Well, when I was very young, I was born in a small family in a developing country, and I, at one point, bought a book that was the evolution of technology, and it was talking about how things work. It was basically like a physical version of that series. If anyone watched How Things Work, it's just very, very cool. I loved it. You would see. I still remember the cover of it. It was a dissected vacuum cleaner, right? And you could see how the air flows, how the engine works in it, and so on and so forth. So that's how I started liking technology. That book really drove me. And then after that, I started doing both hardware and software. And some of my first projects were websites, right? So you would build sites, but you would have no dynamic content because that wasn't a thing back then. That wasn't a thing decades ago. You would only have, you wouldn't even have CSS. It's that old, right? Like you would have tables. A website would be tables. You would have to create a table structure and figure out how the website will look. And then you wouldn't even think of mobile responsiveness because there were no mobile phones back then, right? There was just computer screens, right? And so it was very interesting, and I started doing projects like that. And then one of my first biggest projects was to automatize the all of the client and production management of a manufacturing plant. And that one I did, for example, in Visual Fox Pro, which is a type of C, and it was very cool, but that's very old. That got deprecated like maybe 20 years ago.
So,
So
we're not as old as Cobol and Fortran, way back
no,
when.
no,
But go
no. Yes, yes, of course. Now that you mentioned that, it's like I'm remembering Hidden Figures, from that amazing movie. It was
Yes.
so good. I watched it twice. It was so good. So no, not as old, but then after that, at one point, Microsoft made Visual Fox Pro, and I really enjoyed it because it was the first thing that gave me a visual interface to my code. Because before
Right.
that, I was developing in C, and so anything that you would develop in C would basically be black on white, almost nothing there.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I upgraded to Visual Fox Pro, I'm like, wow, now I have interfaces, buttons, input boxes, everything. That was super cool. So I did that, and I kept doing that for a few years. And then at one point, I started my own company. And then when I started my own company, we already were into the phase of, hey, there are apps out there, right? And there are now, which are called progressive web apps, PWA, which
Mm-hmm.
means that you have dynamic content online, right? You have the blogs, you have the forums, you have the Facebooks, you have the Netflixes, anything that's online, right? The Amazon, whatever. So the transition from Web 1 to Web 2 was made in a way that everyone was completely oblivious to it. It was just a natural way in
Progression.
which we were
Right.
progressing from one to the next, right? Nothing was special about it because it was the same backend. Everything was the same. The only difference is that now, instead of having static content, all of the content was dynamic, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
everything could just be moved around. But it was still on the same server, still in the same format, working in the same format. So we started working on that, and so far We've developed over 200 successful projects, so we're very, very happy. We have over 100 staff. We work with over 100 staff across 14 different time zones. We worked in 19 different sectors, anything from automotive to tourism to hospitality to healthcare, insurance, anything you can think of, basically, we've
So
done.
this is in the Web3 space currently.
No. So this is how we've progressed.
Oh,
right?
okay.
So we started in Web 2, because Web 1 was when I was more or less in my teens, and then it was starting to go to Web 2. By the time I started my company, no one wanted a static website. I mean, they were downselling it so that they were negotiating a lower price, but they actually wanted, a progressive website, which means that they actually wanted, something that's more complicated. So we would obviously just build cool things. And then moving to Web 3 is something that is, in my view, sadly, not as smooth as from 1 to 2, because from 1 to 2, there was no headache. It was just natural. Everyone just moved. We just progressed from Web 1 to Web 2, right? It just transitioned. Now with Web 3, it's like people need to make a fuss about it for people to actually do something about it, right? Like you have these big players making moves, building infrastructure to support it, and so on and so forth, right? Because you cannot support it yourself. As much as the Web3 community, or much of the Web3 community, believes in decentralization, right, of the web, and people having their own contracts and rosters of where things are, and so on and so forth, right? All of that technology, you still need the infrastructure behind it. Like you still need someone to support it. It's just a different mechanism of sharing information, one that needs to basically check peer-to-peer reviews. It's do you have the same website in your space, in your side of the planet like me? And if not, what's the difference? What's the conflict? And then, how do we settle that conflict? Right. So the change to Web3 feels much, much more difficult than it was from 1 to 2.
Well, it is a totally different environment for sure.
Exactly.
It's not the same.
Exactly.
It's a totally different environment, a whole paradigm shift. There's nothing you can really compare it to. It's much more advanced. But there's a lot of social impact that can be very beneficial to society.
Right. Yeah.
So with that said, what projects or companies could you give us some insight on that you are really proud of, that can really help others to understand what it can do?
So we had the privilege to work on a project that was in Africa to help basically bring a democratized flow of cash exchange and information exchange into those countries, right? Like people could basically converse in local currencies. They would have to use crypto, right? But they could buy the crypto in their local currencies, right? And just literally transact, which never happened because banks didn't do that for them, right? Like those people wouldn't open a bank account many times, right? But they would have a crypto wallet, which is so strange to me, right? Like you don't have a bank account, but then
I didn't understand that either until I got educated and went to over to Berkeley. And at that time, I started getting more of an understanding on how there are countries that don't have identity and they're unbanked. And everything really could be easier if we had more of an infrastructure in those locations and have social impact.
Yeah. So that's one of the examples. Basically, it's interesting because, again, those people have access to internet. So as such, they must have an email address somewhere because otherwise you can't create an account for yourself, right? And so on. So you do have access. And so, but you don't have a bank and you don't have ID, and anything you want to do, you can't do because it's like this social norm. And again, I'm not against the current reality. I want to make that clear to anyone listening, right? The current reality
I understand,
works.
but I understand what you're saying too.
Yeah. So basically, in their world, because there is no HSBC there is no Berkeley's, there's no one's there, right, to say, hey, what's your name? My name's Donna Mitchell. My name's Robert Indries, right? Where's your birth certificate? Where's your ID? You know, all of those things. And let me create a bank account. Let you give me your money here. And by the way, in poor countries or countries where banks aren't as common, like as in the US, let's say, where there's a bank on every street, people don't give their money to entities. They don't believe that they will keep their money properly. And many times, by the way, that is a reality of certain countries. So let me share with you a little story. A few years ago, there was a big issue in Lebanon. Another country attacked them. I don't want to say live which
That's
country.
okay. Yeah, we need to move through the cracks. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So they were bombed. Beirut was bombed, and then when that happened, the entire economy crumbled, right? Because I mean, it's the capital city, and Beirut is more or less a poor country. Everything is there in that city, right? So the moment you bomb that, there's a national issue. And so anyone that had money in the bank now could not pull their money out. The banks could legally keep your money, which is the most horrible thing I've ever heard. Legally, there are situations, critical situations in every country that warrant banks to keep the money of the population, which for me was, wow, oh my God, this can actually happen to you. And so this did happen. And we know because we have employees that are from Beirut and they're from Lebanon, various other parts of Lebanon. And so imagine in a normal country, let's say nowadays, because now inflation is high, but let's say nowadays inflation is 7 to 8% a year, whatever, something like that, right? In their country, in Lebanon, inflation some years is 1,000%. 1,000%. That means the money that they have is now worth 10 times less than it was when they got their paycheck, right, a year ago, which is horrible. Imagine that economy. So within an economy like that, you would wish they would have already been, right, on blockchain, on crypto, and so on and so forth, because that decentralization makes inflation a thing of the past to a very large degree, because everyone wants the money to have the same value all the time. No one wants the money to go down, like the value of the money to go down, right? Everyone wants it to be the same. And so if I get paid $1 today, 1 year from now, if I want to spend that $1, I should get the same worth value for that $1, right? Crypto wanted to help with this. It doesn't work yet, by the way. Again, anyone listening, please understand this is a transitionary phase from what we have now to where we're going, because a lot of people have lost a lot of money in Bitcoin or things of that nature because they went all in, they put their life savings in, right? It went to the moon, and then guess what? It crashed in the ocean, right? So you need to be very careful because they are still dependent on cash currency, sadly. And so when something is dependent on a cash currency, it's a bubble because it's fake. You cannot, it's like a playground. You're like playing currency. It's not a real currency. It's dependent on another currency. So as long as you have that codependence, even as an engineer, because I'm a civil engineer by trade, I can tell you that as long as something is dependent on something else, this isn't a standalone item. This will always fluctuate based on the first thing. And so what goes into Bitcoin? Euros, dollars, pounds, and everything like that. The moment everyone takes back all of those, boom, the value of crypto goes down. What would have been a genius move of Bitcoin when it was high was to say, no one can buy anymore, no one can sell anymore. We're keeping it at this value, right? Then everyone that owned crypto at that point, now Bitcoin could have become an exchange in and amongst its community, right? At least for a decade, right? Until it stabilizes, until everyone gets used to it and so on. Because what happened is that people saw that, oh my God, my 100 grand turned into $1 million. I'm going to cash out, right? And so everyone was cashing out. It was like a trend. Everyone cashed out. Bitcoin just fell. And luckily, I wasn't that invested in blockchain and so on and so forth because we had projects that a lot of our projects have to do with hardware. And hardware is still on Web 2, right? Hardware isn't on Web 3. Very little of it is.
Can I ask you a question about that?
Please.
Was rolling through my mind. Excuse me. So your hardware on Web 2, is that the business that you were really in when you drilled down across the different sectors and industries and everything else? It was the hardware that you were successful at. I want to get an answer to that question. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So
go ahead, go forward.
Of course, we always distinguished ourselves within our space because the vast majority, and when I say vast, I mean like 99 point something percent of engineering companies are actually software development companies. So they're not real engineering companies because you can't consider yourself an engineering company if you don't touch hardware, right? You're a software development company, and that's basically it. So in our case, we would hire literal engineers, like people that worked in BMW or people that worked in, various other companies building tech on top of things. And then those people we would use to build anything else that we would need. Like, for example, we built an entire Amazon alternative for a company in New York to give this to small stores, right? So that small stores could now have the power of Amazon, right? And so we built all of it, including the access to the hardware, that the POSs, and so on and so forth, like all of it, the entire infrastructure. It was very cool. It took us like a year and a half to do. Getting back to
thank you. I didn't mean to take you back, but I knew some people might have had that question, and I got a question, so I wanted to clarify that. So go back forward as Web 2 and now in the Web 3.
Yes. So coming back to Web 3, when we look at everything that's happening in Web 3 right now, we need to understand that it is controlled and managed by a very small group of smart people. However, the vast majority of people, and I don't want to sound arrogant when I'm saying that, but they're not, they're the type of people that vote for a specific candidate. I can't say much, but it's like,
I understand. I got it. But everybody I've met is very smart. There's all kind of populations in it. Let's
exactly.
At the end of the day, let's keep it real. But I understand what you're saying. But because I've met a lot of these people, it is a very small community.
That's what I'm saying. Yes. And so because it's a small community, again, I want to finish my idea. Because it's a small community, it cannot get yet mass market adoption. The reason why something like Amazon on Web 2 can work like crazy is because everyone's used to it. Everyone and their grandmother can just go to Amazon and in one click just swipe, and the next day they have something at their doorstep. It just works, right? That same person will never go to Web 3 because they have no idea what it is until enough smart people start using it and see the advantage of it. And, communities in countries like we just talked about earlier start using it because they have no other choice. When that starts happening, right, then everything shifts. So this is going to be a long journey. It's not going to be overnight, right?
But that's why I got you, and that's why you on this podcast in the country you in, so we can get the world going around and around so they can get into the Web 3. So go ahead.
Yeah. So there is an amazing book called Outliers. I recommend everyone listening to this podcast read. So that book explains that there's a circle of influence, and in the middle is the most powerful country or entity or business or whatever, right? And then there are the second most powerful and the third most powerful, and so on and so forth. And it goes out in the circle. And so the outliers are the less powerful, right? Are the poor countries or the whatever, and so on and so forth. So the book explains very, very clearly that the shift of power is always cyclical from the outside towards the middle. It's not that the second becomes the third or the 20th becomes the first or whatever, things like that. It's like the last one, the 20th one eventually becomes the first. And then the new 20th one eventually becomes the first, and so on and so forth, right? So it's cyclical in that way. And again, I'm not doing it justice. The book has 200 something pages that explains it, but it's basically if you look at big empires, right? You look at, for example, the Great Roman Empire. It used to be the biggest empire on the planet, like literally spanning all of Europe, all of North Africa, and was going into Asia. And then it just crumbled from the inside, and now it's a tiny little peninsula. I'm not exaggerating, right? If any Italian is listening to this, like they might get offended, but that's, just the
It
reality
is
of
what it is.
what happened,
It is
right?
what it is. The fall of
Then
the Roman Empire. Everybody knows
exactly,
it.
exactly. And then you look at, for example, the Great British Empire. Again, an empire that at one point seemingly ruled the entire world. Now they're just one island and a bunch of other islands somewhere, and that's it, right? And so doesn't happen overnight, right? This happens across many, decades and centuries sometimes,
Yeah, I'm
right?
watching it right now. Go ahead.
Exactly, exactly, exactly. Oh, I love that you said that. Yes, I
Okay,
love
yeah, I'm
it.
gonna keep
Yes,
it real. It is what it is.
yes,
I know what I'm looking at.
exactly, exactly. So that's exactly what's happening. So eventually, one of these poor countries that did not have infrastructure, but now is funded on the newest infrastructure, on the newest technology, on the newest blockchain, on the newest Web3, on the newest AI, because it didn't have anything before. This is just what it has now. Eventually, theoretically, that outlier will become number one, right? So that's basically it. I mean, I don't know if this will change in the history of AI, right? Because again, AI will change everything, right? It's like no rule in life and in business will ever be applicable after true AI exists. True AI doesn't exist in commercial use right now, just chat AI and so on and
Mhm.
so forth. But I'm talking about real artificial intelligence when I can buy a robot and it can do everything in my house and go, run errands and so on and so on, like real AI. And so when that exists, I don't know how the world will be. But right now, let's say for another 10 years, Outliers is a great book, and it would explain how people now can get on the bandwagon of, whatever is the newest technology that can or might take over, in the next 10 years.
So let me ask you something. What do you consider to be your worst nightmare with everything that you know, all the projects you've seen, everything you've been involved with across the different sectors? What is the one or two things that you see that concerns you?
About what? Sorry. Just so
In the AI space,
yeah.
in the Web3 space, is there
Yeah.
anything that keeps you up at night or you really get
Yeah.
concerned about?
A few things I'm concerned about. Yes. So, number one, there's a possibility that AI will incredibly heavily benefit governments, like to the extent that you can't even imagine. Because once you have AI can control anything for you. So if you have a leader, they might be good, they might be bad, but now they have the power of AI to be able to manipulate an entire country the way they want.
Oh, it can get worse? Okay.
It can get worse. It can get so much worse because guess what? They have unlimited funding. Literally, like a business cannot compete in general terms with the government or with a group of governments, right? Like for example, now I don't know if you know about the new alliance, the BRICS alliance. It's Brazil, Russia, India, China, and Saudi Arabia, BRICS, right? So now they've all joined and they all decided they are not going to sell gas and oil in dollars anymore, but in yen. So big shifts are coming, right? So and if BRICS as an entity uses AI because AI is very involved in China, I don't know if you know, but in China they are able to catch someone based on how they walk. They don't need to see your face anymore. If they saw you walking once, they have you in their database forever. And the moment you step out on the street, they can know where you are anywhere in China because they have the cameras everywhere, right?
Really?
So
I didn't
that's
know that.
yes, you can look into it. It's scary as like there's someone that made a documentary on it, and he literally walked for maybe like 5 minutes, and all of the police was on him, and they just put him in the record as like a criminal, right? And everyone knew, the government knew, like it was just a test, right? But the police didn't know, right? And so they put him up as a criminal. They put his walking as whatever, and then he went into a random place, just walking. In 5 minutes, he was surrounded by police, right?
Wow.
Crazy, crazy. So again, you might lose all of your power as a person, and we might literally go into the Matrix if you've ever seen the movie. Not in that gruesome way of being in pods, but in the way in which now the government can control any part of our life, right? Like that they want. So that's one that's scary because people with power not always have the best of intentions. If they have good intentions, we will all be fine. We know that's many times not the case. So we will see what occurs. Another thing that I am very, or not very scared of, but I really don't like how it sounds. I don't know if you know, but their money might have an expiration date in the future. So if you make money now, like let's say you make $1,000 right now, that money, that quantity of money will have an expiration date tied to it of, let's say, 12 months. If you do not spend that money in 12 months, then the government will take it from you. I kid you not. I kid you not. Money will have an expiration. I hope not, based by the way. I'm just saying that this is what I'm reading and it's scaring the hell out of me because I have a ton of cash saved. You know, I can live off of it for like 10, 20 years. And so I'm like, I really don't want that to expire, right? So
Is that a
don't let
country
that.
we should talk about on the podcast, or is that we just need to talk about that after the podcast? I'm kind of curious.
So this is happening in Europe right now.
Okay.
And so it's very similar. China's communism. It's very, very close to China's way of you can't own real estate. You can only rent it for 100 years, right? So whenever you buy an apartment in China, you don't actually own it. You only own it for 100 years and the government takes it back. I don't know if you know, but
No, I didn't
that's
know
a
that.
thing.
I'm learning
Yeah,
a lot here.
that was a thing for like 100 years now. And so it's very strange. I believe it's very unfair. Just me. That's just me. But I believe it's very unfair. I love owning all of my stuff, right? I don't really own it because if I don't pay taxes on it, right? If I don't pay land tax and council tax and so on, the city and the country will take it away from me. But the land tax is like less than 1% of the value of the asset, right? Whereas in China, they take away the entire asset, you know. So it is what it is, and that might happen in other countries as well. So that's another thing I'm scared of, right? The expiration date on money and assets and capital and so on and so forth. So we'll see how that goes. And number three is I am a little bit, not a lot. Again, all of these are you asked for my biggest worries. These are like might happen. I define fear as false expectations appearing real, right? So it may or may not happen, whatever, you know. So basically, the third one would be technology is evolving much faster than human discipline, which is a huge problem. Huge problem.
That concerns me.
Yes, because now all of a sudden you can literally linger on your couch, do almost nothing all day, just tap a few buttons, a pizza will be at your door, right? If AI takes over and so on and so, you'll even have a robot to do everything around the house. I don't know if anyone saw the movie Wall-E, but it's a very good piece of science fiction animation, right? I've seen it like a decade ago. Maybe I should see it again, but it left such a shocking mark on me when I saw it like 10 years ago. I always loved Disney and Pixar for the stuff they make, but it was so interesting that everyone in that movie was in a word lazy, fat, you know, they didn't know much. Like everything was fed to them because they had nothing to do. Like you had no discipline, right? Because you didn't have to have any. Technology would do everything for you. So within this paradigm shift, even if the entities right now that are trying to regulate AI so that it basically doesn't take over the planet, even if they succeed, humans will make themselves useless. I don't know how to explain, but like the vast majority of humans will choose comfort over struggle, right? Like you won't struggle to be smarter. You will not struggle to compete. You will not struggle to do anything because you'll be happy in abundance. And the US is a great example because the US has been in abundance for like over 100 years now, right? Oh, yeah, it had a couple economic turmoils, but that's nothing compared to how much abundance is in the country, right? It's like crazy. It's like so much money, you know, is being thrown around in the country. And so you look at that and you're like, okay, what if every country on the planet would be like that, right? Like, where would we be? And what if it would get a little bit worse than that, et cetera, et cetera? So those are the three main things that, you know, a little bit scare me, to be honest.
So let's go the opposite way. So what's on your wish list? What do you wish? You said it a little bit, but what do you really wish with everything that you know and aware of and you've read?
This might sound like the opposite of technology. I'm sorry if I go a little corny, but I believe that the solution to all of humanity's problems can be encompassed in one word, and that word is love. I believe if we would literally stop to love ourselves, to love one another, to love, our blessings and everything we've gotten, there would be no fights online. There would be no wars in reality. There would be no conflicts. There would be, everything would just dissipate. Like there would just literally be peace. Like you would not have any issue anywhere on the planet, and not even illness. If people would love themselves, not even illness would be a thing. I kid you not. Because if you go to the root cause of illness, it's always either overeating or too much alcohol or too much smoking or, not enough workout or whatever it is, right? Too much stress. It's always a factor of lifestyle, right? So if you love yourself enough, all of a sudden you don't have those illnesses because now you have a healthy body that'll live 120 years, right? And then everyone else is healthy and so on and so on. It's just a global pandemic of love, right? And so that would literally change humanity's course if everyone would start loving one another properly, right? Like true love, not tough love, by the way, which isn't the thing. People invented that, but it's not real. I don't see a near future in which that can happen because there's so much hate and so much judgment and so much criticism out there still, and it feeds on itself. It's like a cancer, right? Like every one person that gossips creates another gossiper. Every one person that lies creates another liar. Every one person that hits someone creates someone else that might hit them back or hit someone
That's true.
else, and so on. So because there's so many people that are mean and hateful and so on and so forth, that propagates. And so the number of people that say no, I will not do that, right? I will not fight fire with fire. I will believe in Gandhi, who said that an eye for an eye and the entire world goes blind, right? And then I will also believe Jesus when he said, just show the other cheek, right? Don't fight back. Protect yourself, defend yourself, but don't fight back, right? Very difficult to do. Especially when you know the other person is wrong, especially when you know it's injustice and so on and so forth, which, for example, a country being attacked in all-out war in 2022 is utter injustice. It's like you like wouldn't expect it, right? And so,
so with that said, since
yeah.
this isn't a real political podcast,
sure. Yes, sorry, coming back.
and I'm going to roll it back a little bit.
Yeah,
I appreciate everything that you've shared.
right.
And I think it's important that you shared it because I also agree with you. I don't find it corny. In my world, I say it's as if everyone just emulated their Holy One, love and be just,
Yes,
the world would be okay. Whoever
exactly.
your Holy One is, and everybody come in alignment and get busy in alignment. Because if you're out of alignment, then you really need to check yourself.
Yeah.
Because at that point, then we end up in places and spaces that we see today when people, places, and things are out of alignment. So I think with that said, why don't you tell us how we can get in contact with you? Unless there's something else you want to share. Is there a project that you're working on? Is something we need to know about? Any more insight that you forgot to tell us about?
There is a project that I'm working on. However, maybe I'll share that a little bit later, some other time, because we're just starting to build it. I believe it will be very interesting. So I'll just end by saying that I really believe that if we somehow manage, like let's end on a hopeful note, if we somehow manage to not self-destruct as a species, right, and remain loving towards one another, then the future is incredibly bright because we will have self-sustainable energy. We will have self-sustainable food. We will have space travel. We will have, so many things that will literally put our society, our species in a completely different level, right? Like we could literally transcend all of these wars, all of anything, like we could literally go into the future where there's abundance for everyone. So let's hope that, we manage to survive and, in a good way, up until then. because if we get there, then hopefully things will be better. And then people can get in touch with me if they just Google my full name. They should find me everywhere on Google. The first, I don't know how many pages are about me. I have my own website, which is my full name, robertindries.com. And though I have a team of assistants helping me manage comms, if they email me at robertindries.com and they mention Donna Mitchell or the podcast name or whatever, I promise to reply personally.
Oh, now that's exciting. So what is the email address again? It's Robert Indries.
Me at
robertindries.com.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. I missed the me. So with that said, did you ever say where you were coming in from? Did you ever mention that? Is that okay?
No, yeah, that's fine. Right now I'm in Sheffield in the United Kingdom, and next week I will be in Oradea in Romania. So I travel a lot.
You travel an awful lot, and I'm really glad that you made time to come on Pivoting to Web3 podcast and everything that you have shared. Some of the things, there's always good, bad, and ugly. There's always good actors and bad actors. The reason I started the podcast is because I saw a lot of good in the Web3 technologies that could help a lot of populations that are underprivileged, underserved, unbanked, with no identities. And for those technologies and advances that we have in manufacturing, or those populations that are doing really well with all the abundance, let's make sure that we move forward with the technology that we've been given, including AI, and hopefully we all meet in the middle. So with that said, thank you so much for being on Pivoting to Web3 podcast. And everyone else, have a good day, good afternoon, good evening, and I look forward to seeing you at our next release of Pivoting to Web3 podcast. Thanks for listening to Pivoting to Web3 at pivotingtoweb3.com. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so that it gets to you with every episode that comes out. We have lots of great opportunities, limitations, and downward spirals being revealed by our guests. And thank you in advance for all your reviews and comments. I appreciate you so much. I look forward to serving you in the next week's episode.